Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan with Sage Dynamics, and this is the Bushnell RXS 250 red dot sight. I was excited to get my hands on this. I first saw this on a student's gun. He had a demo model about a year ago in a red dot instructor class. And I put some rounds through it, and one of the first things that struck me was the glass was super clear. One of the clearest lenses I've seen yet on an RDS that's pistol native, or kind of intended or germane, if you will, to the use on a handgun. The dot quality was actually really true to size, and I only put probably about a magazine through it, but I noticed immediately that no flicker, no issues with transitioning from target to target very quickly, especially in an indoor range where you tend to notice a dot's flicker or refresh rate a little bit more. So I had to wait, and I'd constantly check the website and see if it was out, and it wasn't, and out, and it wasn't, and check if it's out, and it wasn't. And finally, I was just putting around on Amazon, and I saw that they had them in stock, so I went ahead and grabbed one. This is a sub $300 sight that is shares the same footprint with your Sig Romeo 1 or Delta Point Pro. I mounted it on my Sig P320 because footprint was already there, and I wanted to get some more rounds on this gun just to check it out. So that's the gun that I went with for the review process. Now, if you're not familiar, the review process is going to be 2,000 rounds, provided the Optic continues to make it. That includes various types of ammunition, 115, 124, 124 plus P, 147, as well as periodic one-handed manipulations off the slide, something you might have to do if you've got to reload or manipulate the gun shooting one-handed if your other hand's injured, something we've been doing, teaching with handguns for since handguns would operate that way, basically. Also a drop test, a shoulder height drop test, which is basically done to simulate a reasonable amount of shock being delivered to the gun, an impact without being completely unrealistic. It's not necessarily to simulate someone actually dropping their gun from that height, although that's definitely possible, but also the gun coming in contact with a surface during some sort of altercation or scuffle, or if it literally just falls off of a table when you're at the range. That's definitely something that can happen. It's my duty grade testing, although it's the same testing I do on every single Optic. So let's get right into it. The RXS 250 has a 4 MOA dot size, which I thought was a little strange. It's not too small, it's not too big. It's kind of Goldilocks for some people. A little bit too big for my taste, but I don't, pick the dot size for everybody. I prefer a little bit smaller dot than that. They're quoting 50,000 plus hours, which is about 5 years, on setting 5 of 10 available settings. This is a manual adjust optic, which I really appreciate, although it does have an auto off mode that's 12-hour recycle that can be reset. Adjustments are 1 MOA, which is what we've come to expect from pistol-centric optics. So that's definitely not a departure from anything, and it is the traditional setup of impact versus dot, which is something we saw in the past and we still see on some types of optics, which can be a little bit confusing, but this one is keeping with a lot of the other popular brands and the fact that zeroing shouldn't be a departure from what you're probably already used to. Powered by a 2032 battery, and it is a top-load battery, so you're not going to have to remove it to change the battery. That's definitely a big plus. That's something everybody's looking for going forward with our next generation of optics. One side of the Optic, you have your up button, brightness up. Other side of the Optic, you have your brightness down. Those buttons are recessed, so very little worry, especially for concealed carry, of your gear, your belt, your clothing, bending over a counter, hitting and adjusting those buttons. On the website, Bushnell says that the RXS 250 was tested to the mil standard 810H, which is their durability testing. Some of the testing I do is a departure from what you're going to see in that mil standard. Some people don't like doing testing that isn't mil standard because they feel like mil standard is the bar. I'm here to tell you that it's not. Mil spec is fine. It's an acceptable gradient, whether it be optic or whether it be gun or whether it be accuracy or whether it be features or quality control or whatever. But in my experience, seeing at this point thousands and thousands and thousands of different red dot sights come through my classes over the past couple years, there is some consistencies and durability of features that I've seen and I've observed. If you check out the latest copy of the Sage Dynamics white paper, on the landing page of the Sage Dynamics website, you'll actually get a list of optics that have been reported back to me of failed in the field. Now, most of this data is coming from law enforcement. However, it is telling across brands which features, which designs, and which optics tend to be a little bit more fragile than others. The first 500 rounds, I just got a feel for the Optic. Mounted on this gun using both concealed carry and from a Safariland P320 holster. No issues there. It locks into your DO model. It also locks into your more recent RDS models of the Safariland holster for duty purposes. For concealed carry, I use a Filster floodlight, so optic issues are just not existent as far as the gun working in the holster with this particular optic. I already said the glass is really clear, and that was that optic, the demo optic that I originally checked out over a year ago. And this optic is no different. The glass is really clean. The lens is thin. There's not a noticeable notch filter, so you're not going to get that blue tint, and there's very minimal distortion at the edges of the lens, which I really appreciate. Dot quality is really good. So from a visual standpoint, even in varied lighting, looking into the sun, having the sun at my back, having the sun west, east, or my position, or left, right, I should say, my position, I didn't get any refraction or starbursting of the sun hitting the lens just right to cause that issue that I see with some other optics. So from a clarity standpoint, this thing is amazing. It's one of, I can't say it's the best, but it's one of the cleanest, one of the best optics out there as far as dot quality, dot consistency, and lens clarity. But for every upside, there's a downside. Moved some things around in the review process recently where I used to immediately mount, zero the optic, and do my 500 round burn down. These days, I do 500 rounds on the gun before the burn down, so I get a really good feel for it. Especially with pistol optics, I don't want to do 500 round burn down, drop test the optic, have it break, and then the only really experience I have is that 4 minutes of shooting 500 rounds at the same target, at the same distance, in the same lighting conditions, etc. So the first 500 rounds, I just got a really good feel for it. One-handed manipulation, shooting at varied distances. Wasn't able to work any low light into it. In the summer, it's a little harder to get on the range at night, although I do make an effort when it's something that's night specific. But I was able to use the optic in varied lighting conditions on 2 trips to the range. Dot's really clean. Kind of already mentioned that, but I feel like I have to reiterate that because it is remarkable. There's a lot of dots out there that from optic to optic, you get variances in them, or they're only clean at certain distances or under certain lighting conditions based on the focus parallax, and that's not an issue I noticed with the RXS. That aside, I was concerned about the durability. The durability concern immediately is how thin the lens is. You can actually look inside the optic and see the joiner point where the optic sits inside the body, the shroud. And it's a thin lens, and I didn't know necessarily what type of glass it was made out of because that's not something that's listed on the website. At least I couldn't find it. I couldn't find that information anywhere else. But I've got a lot of experience with manipulation and drop testing and other things at this point. With pretty much I test every red dot site that comes along. So I was a little apprehensive about my first drop test, and that was a little serendipitous because on the first drop I did have a lens breakage crack in the top right corner of the glass. Now, I do like the way the lens broke. You may be like, what? Some lenses, when they break, they become opaque and you can't see through them. This lens shatters a little bit like a windshield. I'm still able to see through the glass. If the optic had failed when it took an impact, not even necessarily a drop, just a hard impact, I could still co-witness and use my iron sights if I had to. If the red dot was still zeroed, I could use the red dot. That's where the problem is. It lost zero. In fact, it was shooting about 4 inches left and about 4 inches high. Okay, so the drop test not only broke the lens, but it also knocked the gun out of zero. Okay, cool. I'll just re-zero it and we'll continue the test. No. The windage works, the elevation does not. So I'm able to adjust the windage to get it back windage-wise as far as point A and point impact, but I can't adjust the elevation at all. And that just basically means this optic, which is a sample size of 1, is a fail. Had it been able to be re-zeroed, I still would have probably not nice things to say about it because it shouldn't have lost zero, especially when they talk about, literally on the website, it says it passed 810H, the mil standard testing. This is something that probably is just a sample size of 1 issue. I will get this optic again and test it again, and if anything is different, you'll get another video. I mean, like, hey, the last video, sample size of 1, that optic must have just been a defect. This one's working great. I hope that's the case because I want all optics to be good, and having a sub $300 optic that is good would be awesome. Though that's kind of a unicorn. We've got some in the high 3s, mid 3s, but sub 300 we're just not there yet because things cost money, quality costs money, reliability and consistency cost money. Not saying Bushnell's not capable of that because they do produce good products. This one, at least on my sample size of 1, is not something I would recommend for duty use, or because it lost zero on that impact, I wouldn't recommend it for concealed carry either because your zero is super important. So if you're curious about if I checked out or if I was going to check out or how I felt about the RXS 250 from Bushnell, there you go. My sample size of 1, I will, like I said, be getting another one, but for right now, I'm not going to recommend it. It's not something I'm going to recommend at all, just based on the fact that I got 500 rounds through it, and not only did the lens break on the drop, but I lost zero, which to me is more of a big deal. I don't mind the lens cracking. It's still something I don't want to have happen, but the loss of zero is completely unacceptable, and that's something that hopefully is just a one-off, but we'll have to see. If nothing changes, I'll probably won't even bother to do a video on it. However, if I do get another unit and it makes it through the drop testing, or same thing happens but it's able to maintain 0, I'll definitely be doing an update on that. If you're curious about testing procedures, or you're curious about how many different optics I look at, like I said in the beginning of the video, you can check out the white paper on sagedynamics.org and see where I am with all the popular optics that I am continuing to test. Because all kinds of optics get tested, but not every optic gets a video, because I just don't have that kind of time. I'm Aaron Count with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.